I know it's been a while since the last Why Nobody Plays video, like a really long time, and I wouldn't say I intentionally tried to avoid making another installment for one of my biggest series. I mean, by far my biggest series on YouTube. It's just, I got tired of analyzing hard to summon monsters with bad effects and lots of attack. Certainly there are differences in power level and viability with cards like Earthbound Immortals versus the Wicked Gods versus the Nordic Gods, but after a while it all just kind of felt like the same thing. It's still fun reviewing their strengths and weaknesses, so I'm sure I'll make more videos about similar themes in the future, but I want to get away from the big hard to summon monster cards and focus on something drastically different, and that is Destiny Board, one of the many weird alternate win condition cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! If you guys enjoyed today's video on our departure from talking about large monster cards, maybe we can do another Why Nobody Plays about a different win condition card, because there certainly are a lot of them out there. I really wanted to talk about Destiny Board in today's video too, in particular, because this card has had a lot of opportunities to be competitively viable, which is what we talk about in the Why Nobody Plays series. The reason being is that this card was released way back in the day, 2003, and I feel like a lot of times when we look at cards in the Why Nobody Plays series, people go, well, if it would have been released back in old school Yu-Gi-Oh! It would have been really powerful. Because of how old this card is though, we really can't use that defense, which is good by the way, because it means we can look at the card objectively and say, what went wrong with Destiny Board? Why wasn't it very good? Also, the reason that I like Destiny Board is because it actually got sort of recent support. It got a new card in 2016 and 2 new cards in 2019. Now, in a lot of cases, I get the other type of comment on Why Nobody Plays videos that say, well, if this old card got more modern support, it would be super competitively viable. And in the case of Destiny Board, a lot of the new cards actually do solve some of the initial issues of the card, but it's not quite enough to make it competitively viable. Destiny Board is also a great card for this series because it has 0 tops in the entire history of Yu-Gi-Oh! Not even one regional qualifier top, and especially not a YCS or a WCQ, so it really is the perfect candidate for a win condition card to talk about in this series. Before we talk about the modern support and modern problems with Destiny Board, I want to spend some time looking at the original card and talking about the inherent issues with this design. This is a continuous trap card that says, when this card and all 4 spirit message cards with different names are placed on your field, you win the duel. Wow, how hard can that be? Well, it says, once per turn during your opponent's end phase, place 1 spirit message card from your hand or deck in your spell and trap card zone face up in the proper order of INAL, which obviously spells final. When any spirit message card or Destiny Board you control leaves the field, send all spirit message cards and Destiny Board you control to the graveyard. One sort of ruling that I feel should be common knowledge, even though I've seen a couple comments about it in the past that don't realize it's true, is that you do not have to place the Destiny Board card in the left-hand column and then go right in a row with the letters to directly spell out final like it's supposed to, at least in a lore way. The reason is that when it says that you have to place the letters in the proper order, it's talking about that you have to play the I first, and then the N, and then the A, and then the L. In other words, you don't have to worry about where the physical cards are actually placed on the field, as long as they're placed in the right order to spell out final. Now, if you've only seen this card, you might not think it's too bad. After all, you can at least place the spirit messages from your hand or deck, so if you happen to draw them, that's not an issue. And oh, hey, maybe if you draw them, you can shuffle them back with Magical Mallet or Reload or Card Trader, something along those lines. Before we go too much further, I want to take a look at the spirit messages themselves so you guys can see the bonuses that you get for placing these on the field, because obviously with Destiny Board, you know, as you're accumulating more and more spirit messages, you want to have some bigger bonuses on there because your spell and trap card zone is slowly going to go away. First off, Spirit Message I is a continuous spell card that says this card can only be placed on the field by the effect of Destiny Board. Okay, this one doesn't have an effect. Well, what about N? Spirit Message N really kicks things up, and it says this card can only... Wait a second. Okay, I'm noticing a pattern here, and yes, that is true. None of these Spirit Message cards have any bonus effects. You actually can't play them at all. They are dead cards in your hand until you get to the Destiny Board. This is a bad thing. This is a bad thing because if these cards maybe had effects that you could like activate them to destroy a card and they shuffle themselves back into your deck for the Destiny board, that might be kind of neat. But as it stands right now, you are playing with a lot of cards in your deck that literally do nothing unless you have Destiny board out. And even if you have the Destiny board out, if you have like the N and the L in your hand, they're not going to do anything until the Destiny board places them on the field. Once again, I'm sure I'll get at least a couple comments from people saying just shuffle them back with Card Trader or Magical Mallet, but as we've talked about in the past, in this exact series, Why Nobody Plays, those cards are just not very good, so combining bad cards with other bad cards to make them less bad is usually not a good deck building decision. In any card game, balancing an alternate win condition is really difficult because you don't want the alternate win condition cards to be better or more consistent or more viable than the regular win condition, in this case dealing 8,000 damage to the opponent. What happens in most cases then is that alternate win conditions are usually too slow or too inconsistent or something along those lines in the way that actually makes them way worse than the regular win condition. It's not so much an alternate win condition as it is a worse win condition that you basically would never want to do in a normal game. Destiny board is not exactly a fast card, and I think that's pretty well known. I mean, you have to wait for 4 of your opponent's end phases to pass to actually assemble all 5 of the parts of this card to win the game. However, it could have been a lot slower, and I don't think the speed of this card is the reason that it's not very good. And we know this because Final Countdown, which is a little bit over twice as long because you'll go through 10 of your opponent's end phases, actually did see a fair amount of success. You know, it topped regionals, it even topped YCSs, and that card takes 6 more turns. I know it might look like it takes like 4 times as long, but keep in mind that Destiny board only works in your opponent's end phases, where Final Countdown's 20 turns count both players, so it's actually only 6 turns longer, which might sound like a lot longer. It is more than double the amount of time that you'd be waiting for Destiny board. The fact that Final Countdown is not a lingering card on the board for your opponent to destroy is a huge advantage and is well worth waiting 6 more end phases. With Destiny board, your opponent doesn't have to have a negate when you first draw it like they would with Final Countdown. No, they can wait a couple turns, wait for you to assemble a couple of the pieces on the field, and then simply have like 1 Mystical Space Typhoon or 1 Dust Tornado, and you lose all of your progress, because for some weird reason this card also has the downside that when any of the pieces or Destiny board are destroyed, you lose all of them right there. Maybe the card wouldn't have been so bad if it was a different way, but obviously for lore reasons they want you to assemble all 5 of the letters in a sequence as it would have been in the show. This isn't unique to Destiny board, it's very similar with a lot of the other alternate win condition cards like Final Countdown, but one of the issues with an early Destiny board strategy would have been if you didn't open or at least draw the Destiny board within the first couple draws. The problem with this is that now you're wasting your stall cards, which is what you'd probably be playing in a Destiny board deck, but you're wasting them at a time when you don't actually have the Destiny board on the field, setting you up closer to your win condition. That's a big problem because it means when you do eventually draw the Destiny board, you're down a couple of stall cards because you had to use them just to stay in the game. Going off of the Exodia comments that I've gotten in the past, I'll probably see just a couple comments from people saying that they'll use Destiny board as like their backup strategy, and then they'll have a regular strategy for the rest of the cards, and that's fine, I guess, for more casual play, but in terms of being competitively viable, for the exact same reason that just splashing Exodia into a random deck never really worked ever, you once again just don't want to fill your deck with a bunch of blank cards like the Spirit Messages, especially if your deck isn't even focusing on that, because sure, that means you might draw the Destiny board sometimes, then you'll try to play a Destiny board deck, but conceptually, putting in a sort of small Destiny board engine, I guess you would call it, into a normal strategy might seem like something that would be good for old school Yu-Gi-Oh, but we have the data, we know what happened at tournaments, and something like that with Destiny board, or Exodia for that matter, just didn't work even back in the day. So the Destiny board strategy does nothing for 13-ish years, and then you finally get Dark Sanctuary in 2016. This is a field spell card from Duels Pack Rivals of the Pharaoh, and actually does try to solve many of the Destiny board issues in a pretty interesting way. If a Spirit Message card would be placed on the field with Destiny board, you can special summon it as a normal monster instead, and if you do, it is unaffected by card effects except Destiny board and cannot be targeted for attacks, but does not prevent your opponent from attacking you directly. Keep in mind that monster that it's it's summoning is super weak. It's a level 1 monster with 0 attack and 0 defense. Next, when an opponent's monster declares an attack, toss a coin, and if the result is heads, negate the attack, and if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to half the current attack of that opponent's monster. So what does this thing aim to do? Well, it aims to solve two big issues. First off, this helps free up your back row because you no longer have to place these spirit messages in the back row. You can just summon them as monsters instead. They don't block attacks, which kind of sucks because if you have no other monsters, your opponent can just hit you directly. However, when your opponent attacks, which by the way, this isn't a once per turn effect, you get the chance to negate it and do some damage to your opponent. Even though the spirit message normal monsters that you're summoning are unaffected by card effects, the Destiny board itself as well as Dark Sanctuary are certainly not, which means if your opponent just has a Twin Twisters or a Mystical Space Typhoon, even though they can't hit the spirit messages, they can always just blow up the Destiny board and you still lose all of those messages that you summoned. And I know this is going to sound weird, but I feel like you're actually less likely to win with Destiny board than you would be with the Dark Sanctuary random burn damage effect, because while you are slowly amassing several spirit message 0 attack and 0 defense monsters, your opponent is also building their own board, and by 2016 standards that probably won't take them too long. Your opponent's going to have a full field in just a matter of turns, and then they can just start hitting you directly with 5 monsters every single turn. If the Dark Sanctuary does not block a lot of attacks, then you'll probably just lose really fast, but if it does start to block attacks, maybe you actually do win the game off of that burn damage. For this reason, I hilariously think that Dark Sanctuary actually might have a higher win percentage than the Destiny board itself, even in a dedicated Destiny board strategy. A few years pass where Destiny board basically makes no impact on the metagame, even with Dark Sanctuary. What a big surprise there. And it isn't until 2019, not too many months ago actually, because it's in September, that Legendary Duelist Immortal Destiny comes out. Now in this set, we got a lot of indirect as well as direct support for Destiny board. The spoiler here is that none of these cards actually made Destiny board or any sort of Destiny board strategy actually be competitively viable even at a rogue level. So for this video, I'm mostly just going to focus on the 2 cards that actually specifically name Destiny board, because you know what? These cards are not too bad, especially in combination with Dark Sanctuary released a couple years prior. Dark Spirit's Mastery is by far the better of the 2 cards that specifically list Destiny board in their effect. It is a normal spell card that says discard 1 card to add 1 Destiny board or 1 level 8 Fiend monster from your deck or graveyard to your hand. Already we're off to a pretty great start because it's basically a Signet mining either for Destiny board or a level 8 Fiend monster. This set actually had a new Dark Necrofear card called Curse Necrofear that was pretty decent, so this card could theoretically be used in a deck playing the Curse Necrofear as well as Destiny board, which is kind of cool. The second effect says you can banish this card from your graveyard except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard. Place any number of Destiny board and or spirit message cards with different names from your hand or graveyard on the bottom of your deck in any order, then draw the same number of cards. You can only use each effect of Dark Spirit's Mastery once per turn. That is a hard once per turn effect. This card solves several issues, and it does it in a really clever way. By letting you search Destiny board, it gives you some more consistency, because prior to this card, there wasn't a reliable way to get to Destiny board in the early stages of the game, other than just using generic draw power to get there, which was fine in some cases, I mean I guess, but this card actually directly searching Destiny board helps alleviate the issue that I talked about earlier, where drawing Destiny board after like turn 2 or turn 3 makes your deck a lot worse. Additionally, the graveyard effect of this card is super valuable. It's basically a magical mallet for all of your spirit message cards that you don't really want in your hand. Now you might remember earlier I said that magical mallet wasn't very good, but the difference here is that you would probably already play this card without the graveyard effect, so the graveyard effect is just a bonus on the already good searching ability. This is very different from the main effect being a magical mallet, and also keep in mind that because this card is already in the graveyard when you use it, you're actually not taking a minus in card advantage. It might seem like a very small change, but if magical mallet just drew 1 more card than it actually does, so 1 more card than you put back, then it would actually be a competitively viable card and probably banned by this point because it would be a free mulligan. However, because you have to send the magical mallet itself to the graveyard and you just draw an even amount to what you put back, you take a -1 in card advantage every single time you use it. If you have 6 cards when you use a magical mallet, you shovel back 5, and then you draw 5, but now you only have 5 cards, not 6, because you no longer have that magical mallet. This card, though, because it's already in the graveyard, doesn't factor into card advantage, so it's just a straight trading out these spirit messages monsters for more draws without taking a minus. Not only is Sentence of Doom not very good when you compare it to Dark Spirit's Mastery, it's just not a very good card in general. This is a continuous trap card released out of the exact same set in 2019, and it has two different effects. The first effect says you can target any number of your Fiend monsters that are banished or in your graveyard up to the number of Destiny Board and or Spirit Message cards you control, add them to your hand. The second effect of this card says you can send this card from your spell and trap zone to the graveyard to place one Spirit Message card from your hand, deck, or graveyard in your spell and trap card zone. This is treated as being placed by the effect of Destiny Board. So this card has a couple problems that make it significantly worse than Dark Spirit's Mastery. With Dark Spirit's Mastery, you know, it was an option to play Destiny Board with the Fiend support out of this set. With this card, it is basically a necessity. If you want this card to be good, you have to not only be playing Destiny Board, but also all of that new Fiend support. The Fiend support was actually better than the Destiny Board support, but it's still not quite good enough to warrant actually mashing up with this strategy. Speed was never the issue with Destiny Board. It's over twice as fast as Final Countdown, so the main issue is that you can always just destroy the Destiny Board and they lose all of their progress. So with Sentence of Doom, while it does speed up the Destiny Board by one turn, in the grand scheme of things, that never was the issue with this strategy. Every single person at this point in 2019, when this card was released, had at least one copy of Nightmare Phoenix in their extra deck, which pretty much single-handedly invalidates the entire Destiny Board deck. I chose Destiny Board for today's video because it has like two eras of where it wasn't very good. You have the era where it's just by itself and has no direct support, where it's basically unusable, and then you have the era where it gets support in two different sets over the course of several different years, and it's still not quite good enough to make it a viable card. I hope you guys enjoyed today's discussion video though. I'll catch you in the next video. Goodbye.